Hello and welcome back. We are the Pilgrims of Plunder. This is our podcast. I am Greg and I am joined with Pastor Doug, and we are going to randomize a topic from almost all of Doug's suggestions for episode topics because I only have one written and I don't feel like committing to it right now. So we're going to, in good nerdy fashion, use dice to determine all things. And of our two lists, because the list is getting pretty long, we have a backlog. We will pick from our first list, which is then a D20. And we will get question number 18. Ooh, the role of amusement in the Christian life. And that's a fun one. But since it's not my topic, I'll let you go first to
No,
expound
that's not how this is going to work. No, this is your turn. So,
the role of
lead us
amusement.
in.
All right. So I can actually start from that. Or start with that.
Shut your brain off.
It's a it's a broad topic, though I will start in a narrow focus. But that needn't be the focus of the episode. So, what is the role of amusement? Oh boy, what a good question. Because I think we've gone way too far into the realm of amusement because it's convenient and intentionally convenient and designed to be convenient and appealing and concentrated. My new book that I want to write, which I never will, I want to entitle it Cupcakes and Concupiscence. And so uh, I've been doing a lot of pondering during my mortification of sin
About
reading
cupcakes?
about cupcakes and concupiscence. Yeah, it's anyway. So entertainment are like cupcakes. Modern entertainment, they're really bad for you. So the role of entertainment, um, oh
You want
boy,
me to jump in?
yeah, I have so
All
many
right. So,
things.
so,
You
so,
gotta
so it's
ground
interesting.
it
So,
right now.
on a narrow focus, of
Yes.
course, that wonderful notion of amusement, what literally it is to shut off one's brain.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's a place for that. There's a place for rest. There's a place for simple amusement. But we have clearly created an amusement culture. And the one thing that I find fascinating is when I talk with the older generation, those my parents' age and older, they almost don't have it, especially in a popular cultural sense. Like, if they watch a Godzilla movie, it's like it's a guy in a rubber suit. I don't get it. If they watch The Lord of the Rings, they're like, this is not real. It makes no sense. Now, we've done a video on fantasy, but part of amusement is to shut that is to again, shut down thinking and just have fun for fun's sake. Now, of course, in older cultures they did have amusement, but it was much more narrowly focused and it was much more purposeful. And especially when you have to work 8 hours, 12 hours a day, and then the Sabbath is for mostly worship, you have very little time for amusement. But because we're such a prosperous and wealthy culture, which is a blessing of God, we have lots of extra time. And so we can amuse ourselves a great deal. But has that seeped into so many other aspects of our culture that we demand to be amused. If when I go to school, the teacher better amuse me. Or even worse yet, when I go to church, I better be amused. And so much of modern evangelical worship, I think, is based on amusement. So we've created this culture of amusement, and how dangerous is that, and how much do you fight back against that?
Right. Um, it's very dangerous. So, and I like the history of amusement, um, or entertainment or whatever. And yes, so we are in an interesting situation culturally and technologically. And they kind of feed into one another because as technology increases, free time increases because it starts off with just the basic ability of automation or machines or certain processes. And so it takes less work to accomplish the same amount of outcome, essentially. So technology has increased, which has given us more free time. And I know I've said it before in one of our videos, but I love that Matthew Henry quote. And keeping in mind, in his day, he had the same complaint. So it's nothing new. But he had brought up that as technology increases and as we have more free time, we should use that free time, for the labors of the church, for our worship and service unto God. So he had a good way of, well, now that I have extra time, what should I do with it? It's like, well, you should do good things with it. So not only do we have more free time, but we also have a technological ability to provide near limitless amusement. And this is something that Susie and I have discussed. When we were growing up, there were limitations to certain types of entertainment based off of technological limitations. You watched an episode of a TV show, that was it. It ended. And there were commercials. And so you were forced to go do something else because you ran out of it ended. And so you had to engage with other people because you couldn't just binge watch. Binge watching is a very modern concept, because you now have streaming services, you have the technology to facilitate that. And I think that there is an incredible amount of negative impact to that with social media, with streaming services. And it's not just a personal opinion. I mean, and though I care not for much anything pertaining to the realm of psychology or for the soft sciences, there is a growing amount of research and findings linking a rapid decline in mental health and stability and interpersonal skills due to just staring at a screen all day long, every day. So it's related to this. But yes, to your point, and I suppose the more critical aspect of it is, if your whole life is nothing but being entertained and you are encouraged to have no self-discipline and to have no structure, you will inevitably, because you can't compartmentalize that. If you could, you'd have discipline and you wouldn't be having this problem. You will inevitably bring that into the worship of God. You will, whether or not you like it, demand overtly or subtly to be entertained, to be amused, even to that point of, the preacher had wonderful theology, but he's boring, and so I couldn't really pay attention, right? That's a part of a problem as well. So yes, we will inevitably bring that in. And I'll throw out, it's due to a complete lack of discipline, because the technology isn't inherently evil, though it's designed to get us and keep us and retain us, because that's how they make money, is through retention of staring at things, to use streaming services as the example. And so since that's what we've demanded, that's how the market has gone, that's how technology has been developed. So the evil technology that exists because that's what we demanded it to be, and we are now victims of our own demise. Is that it? Victims of our own doing. As Wilson says, eventually you'll get to where you're going. And I think we've arrived. So that was my random complaints about it.
Well, yeah, again, we're doing this topic just cold because
Right.
obviously I mean, you read the creeds and they warn about excessive recreation, to use the Westminster Larger Catechism term. So, I mean, that's always been a danger, but we've definitely have created a culture where it's much more common. We have you can get away with it. I mean, you can spend, you know, 40 hours a week raiding in World of Warcraft and somehow pull that off. Where
Right.
historically, if you did that, well, you just you would die of hunger eventually.
Right. You starve to
Um,
death.
yeah. So I guess there's two approaches we could do with this as I ponder this out. Um, wow, just my brain just locked up. So, is there the general danger of recreation, or a particular modern problem about recreation that's dangerous? And we've talked about like the fantasy elements and stuff, because there's definitely how we enjoy recreation is different than I think many past generations.
Mhm.
I mean, there's much more focus on fantasy and science fiction and escapism, and so that's a danger. I mean, as opposed to the older approach is go down to the inn and get drunk and engage in some brawling or something. Now you can
Right.
do that online with video games. So
Right.
I suppose, I mean, is there a general danger of recreation, and then the issue of the worldly danger of recreation?
Yes and yes. And going into it, of course, and topically, there's nothing wrong with drawing the distinction between recreation and modern recreation, but not to, of course, get distracted as if the recreation or the technology around it is somehow is the problem. People are the problem. Um, it's, the more freedom you give sinners, the more sin will abound. So the less restraint, the fewer restraints placed upon us, either by law or by necessity. Like you said, if you sat around and did nothing all week, you'd starve to death back in the day. That's sloth. You can be slothful and lazy now and not starve to death. So the sin is the same, the person's the same. It's just that uh, there's a lot of things in place that distract us from how sinful we are being, because we have crafted a world that mitigates the effects of sin. And so,
I,
oh, okay. But so like with recreation, now of course, drunkenness is a sin. So just getting drunk for any reason is and always has been a sin. Um, that we are not as drunk because we have video games doesn't make us less sinful. It just shows that we're lazy. We're too lazy to get drunk. So we play video games instead. So technology, again, it masks our laziness. We brought this up in the previous one of the other conversations about mortification. We were talking about sexual lust. That contrast between prostitution and pornography. You're still just as much a sinner. It's just that you don't have to face consequences with pornography because it doesn't require you to even leave your house or have somebody come over.
yeah.
There's no potential for physical, negative impacts, you to being found out, social, so on and so forth. So you're still just as sinful. It's just our world, our
Contained.
culture has shifted around the outcomes of it, which allows us to then excuse it and make it not seem as bad because there are no
Yeah,
negative
I mean,
outcomes.
I think I mentioned this in that video many weeks ago, that if you wanted to engage in evil, you'd go down to the local tavern, you'd get drunk, you get into a brawl, you find a prostitute,
Right.
on all these great heinous sins. Now you just order in some marijuana in your mother's basement, you engage in
Yep.
violent video games and watch porn.
Yep.
Same thing,
It's the
same
same
sin, but
thing.
now it's just
Right.
it's just now contained.
Right.
But that notion, yeah. So I want to start the broad one, because
Sure.
it's easy to pick on our culture, which has many problems, which does fascinate me, because I've been watching a lot of Tolkien yesterday, last few weeks, and thinking of going to Renaissance Fair, and then like, well, wait a minute here. But
Ren
let's do the broad one
Fair.
first. Right?
Yay, Ren
They,
Fairs.
they're
Nerd.
scaring themselves, but the, it's interesting, the sin of excessive recreation. Do you know what commandment the Westminster Larger Catechism sticks it under?
Is it not stealing?
Murder.
Oh, that's a lot better. That's a lot better
Yeah,
than what
right,
I
right.
had. All right.
So, what are the sins forbidden in the sixth commandment? Let me just read it. It's not too long. The sins forbidden in the sixth commandment are all taking away of life of ourselves or others, except in the case of public justice, lawful war, or necessity of defense,
Right.
The neglecting or withdrawing the lawful and necessary means of preserving life,
Mhm.
sinful anger, hatred, envy, desire of revenge, all excessive passions, distracting cares is under murder, immoderate use of meat, drink, labor, and recreation.
Yep.
And finishing up the paragraph, provoking words, oppression, quarreling, striking, wounding, and whatsoever else tends to the destruction of life of any. It's interesting. It puts recreation under excessive recreation,
Right.
immoderate use of
Immoderate.
recreation
The
under murder
immoderate use of
is
recreation.
of and the text is interesting. The proof text, Isaiah 5:12. Their banquets are accompanied by lyre and harp and trampoline, right, Doug?
Yep.
Tambourine and
Trampolines.
flute. Yeah, that'd be intermodal use of the two,
Wait,
and by
what was the,
wine.
hold on, what was the reference again? Isaiah what?
Isaiah 5:12. Their
Okay.
banquets are accompanied by Isaiah 5:12. Their
Yep.
banquets are accompanied by lyre and harp and by tambourine and flute and by wine. But they do not pay attention to the deeds of the Lord, nor do they consider the works of his hands. So actually, next time
Interesting.
Pentecostal talk to me about dancing in front, but I might go with this verse. But that's an
I
interesting
like that.
verse.
That's
Yeah,
actually a good. Let's
yeah.
counter
So
Pentecostalism with this. I'm all for
yeah, right.
that.
So, but and now of course the Psalms talk about these instruments in positive ways, but the sin here is they're ignoring the ways of the Lord. And it's interesting. I looked up in the only good Webster's dictionary, 1828, the
Mhm.
definition of recreation: refreshment of the strength and spirits after toil. That's
Mhm.
good. Amusement, which again literally is shutting off your brain.
Right.
Diversion.
Right.
And the second definition is relief from toil or pain, amusement and sorrow or distress. But I like that first definition: refreshment of the strength and spirits after toil. There is a time for recreation, amusement,
Sure.
yeah, and then diversion. And of course, that's the real, besides the general laziness, not being productive, but that diversion.
Right.
But it is interesting that you are some ways murdering yourself and or your neighbor by too much recreation. It is so interesting what that they put under murder.
That is.
So
So the first part of that definition as well, the regenerative properties of recreation, I think falls better within Christianity into the Sabbath. Right.
yeah,
That is the resting from labor. So which needn't be how we define recreation, of course, but there is a rest. You see that all even throughout through Leviticus, um, that even the land was to have a Sabbath rest. And that subsequently, having failed to obey all of these things, one of the parts of God's judgment upon his people and pronouncement was that you will be carried to captivity and I will give the land a rest that because you did not. So a resting is good. I think inordinate work is also uh problematic. But so recreation for that sake of work, and real quick, just kind of rolling it back just for the context, the verse before verse 12, so in Isaiah, um, because it does also put a context to their type of celebration. Woe to those who rise up early in the morning that they may pursue strong drink, who continue late in the evening until wine inflames them. The lyre and the harp, the tambourine and pipe and wine are in their feasts, but they do not regard the deeds of the Lord or consider the works of his hands. So it's not just, again, not to soften it, but it's not just, you know, hanging out with friends in the evening. The context of those who are being spoken against or that type of behavior is, what do you do all day? You wake up with the intent to pursue drunkenness and revelry. And
right.
so that's even, revelries are denounced in numerous places in the New Testament as well, that we are not to partake in those kinds of feasts or celebrations. Those are very sinful. Drunkenness, orgies, so on and so forth. That all being said, I do like that the second half of verse 12, which is a very interesting point, that they do not regard the deeds of the Lord or consider the work of his hands. So it's
Yeah.
not just you're getting drunk and you're, going to a concert, which very well may be in and of itself sinful, and thou ought not to do that. But what is the greater sin? It's that because you're doing that, you are not only are you doing something you shouldn't, you're not doing something you should, which
Yeah.
is to regard, to be mindful, to instead
Mhm.
of being amused, not thinking through drunkenness and rock and roll, to being to muse, to think upon the things of the Lord, upon the works of his hands and the things that he has done. Which is interesting because the context, at least narrowly, on
Yeah.
that, I'm thinking a lot on this verse. That's a fascinating verse. Isn't you're being lazy and so your family's starving to death. Right. So you can't
Yeah.
excuse this verse as, well, my family or even I, I'm a functional alcoholic, if you will.
Yeah.
My life isn't falling apart. I'm not hurting anyone. I don't know why I air quoted that one. You're not hurting anyone, so on and so forth. But the focus of this verse isn't that you're harming yourself or others
Yeah.
directly. It's
Yeah.
that you are grossly wasting your time, which should be spent pondering the works of God. Yes. It's very
It's
interesting.
interesting though, to go the flip side, the catechism also says that recreation is commanded, which is all very interesting. And
Sure.
this is question 135. What are the duties required in the sixth commandment? And start in the middle of the paragraph because it's a huge paragraph.
Right.
Patient bearing of the hand of God. I love that.
Yep.
Quietness of mind, cheerfulness of spirit. That's hard for us Scottish people. A sober use of meat, drink, and physics, medicine,
Right.
sleep, labor, and recreation.
Right.
So
And that's the
it's
careful,
interesting.
was the qualifier careful use? Is that the word they
Yes,
used?
yes, yes.
Right, which is
So
contrary to the excessive
yes,
use of those things.
yes. But and of course the verses it's going to cite, not surprisingly, is Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 4, a time to weep. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. And then down in verse 11 is the other verse it gives. He has made everything appropriate in its time.
Hmm.
He has also set eternity in our heart, yet so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning to the end.
Right.
So I love that it's both commanded and also forbidden, but of course in the correct context.
Right. And that's the thing. If all you do all day is party, then that's a violation. But if you've worked and labored and then you have some form of recreation, as long as the recreation itself is not sinful,
Right.
then okay.
Which I guess gets to the question then, and again, we're doing the broad approach instead of just throwing stones at our modern culture, which we should throw stones at. What is the appropriate
Appropriate.
level of
Yep.
recreation? I think
Right.
for most of them, I'll just speak of myself. It's like it's kind of assumed that's going to be at least always some part of the day. No, I believe I work hard for the church. I put in my 50 hours a week working at the church, but there's always a time where I watch a YouTube video at night and or just, you shut off, you do something that's fun.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, like is reading a book, I'm not talking off the top of
Yep.
my mind here. You know, I guess what is recreation? I already read the definition, but defining is interesting. Like when the day is done, and assuming the eyes are not too weary, I love reading some book on World War II in the Pacific.
Right.
Is that recreation? Because
Sure.
because in a sense of refreshment, it is. It refreshes me. It's
Right.
something. I mean, I love my job dearly, but it's like, okay, this is just something I get to turn off my one part of my brain, my pastor brain, for a while and just get to read about, the invasion of Guadalcanal or something.
Yep.
And it's amusing, and I guess it's a diversion. I am learning something. Well, which I guess gets another question: is there different qualities of recreation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And and this has become a more apparent given, and again, not to say our modern culture, but I'm going to keep defaulting on a technological approach again, because technology is what the creators of it want it to be for their financial gain and benefit. And it's also what we want it to be, or what we think we want it to be, because of our inordinate love of amusement. So it is what everybody wanted it to be. The simplest example, Netflix used to not auto advance episodes in a series. That was not a feature. At the end of an episode, you'd have to push the button to watch the next episode. They got rid of that, and they make it auto advance by default, because they found if people were given the choice or asked to push a button, they were less likely to watch the next episode. So in order to keep you, they remove your ability to choose. They just say, here's the next thing. You want to watch this now. So anyway, that's whatever. Blame where blame's due. I don't really care. It's their fault for doing that to us. It's our fault for letting them do that to us and doing it to ourselves. But there is definitely a difference in recreation. I keep the I'll whatever. I'll approach it as it comes to me. There are observable neurological differences in reading a book versus watching a movie. Your brain engages differently. There are differences in interacting with a person physically, or I guess dynamically, actively talking to somebody, versus sitting with them watching a thing. There are definite differences in that, and you can express those in quality, I suppose, as well. When you start getting into the mindless self-indulgence, putting something on to not think, and binge watching a series for 4 hours, you might as well have just been drunk that whole time, right? Because your brain has done nothing. You've thought of nothing. You've accomplished nothing. You've checked out of all reality. One of the criticism of alcohol, ignoring the actual potential physical negative impact, although sitting on a couch watching TV all day also has secondary negative impacts to health, physically and mentally. It changes how you think. Alcohol, while you are drunk, it changes how you think. Drunkenness, right? And well, I mean, even any of it. How you think and how you process while you're sitting there watching a thing is different than how you think if you are engaging a different medium of entertainment. I will definitely say there is a difference between good and bad recreation.
Because there is recreation, and again, I like the old definition: refreshment of strength and spirit after toil.
Right.
Now, so like you enjoy painting, you enjoy reading a good book.
Right.
You enjoy, going and working out. You enjoy writing a Dungeons and Dragons module. I'll just be silly,
right.
But that's just
you enjoy playing golf for some reason.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Why? Who knows why? But so
that's a thing.
But the danger is just the more it is going away from refreshment of strength and spirit,
Mhm.
which implies a positive thing. I like the difference between strength and spirit. And the more it slides into amusement and the more it slides into diversion, now you're in trouble.
Right.
Because I would just going with these terms, I think there a place for some amusement. You just watch something stupid. I guess so. I mean, obviously it's not overtly sinful. There is a time just
Right.
to be amused.
Should we? I don't know.
But
Do we?
yeah, well,
Yes.
but, yeah, let's ponder this. But I'm getting more worried. Diversion, that implies you're avoiding something you should be doing.
Right.
So I like these three levels. I like the refreshment, amusement, diversion. Thank you, Mr. Webster from 1828.
Mhm.
This is helpful because refreshment generally very good in the appropriate moderate level.
Right.
Amusement, I'm getting worried. Diversion, we have problems.
Right. Because you can be refreshed spending time with your wife. Not only is it refreshing, but it's actually productive. It's conducive to mutual health of the marriage, of the family, and I think this is one of those things, and I really wish I remember where it was, where the quote came from. Sorry, somebody who's probably long since dead that I can't attribute anyway. Um, if you can't pray about the activity beforehand, you shouldn't be engaging in it at all. And and so you can, running with that reasoning, you can refresh yourself with your wife and incorporate God in it, which I think, again, going back to the whichever prophet that was, Isaiah, the Isaiah
Isaiah 5.
text. And
Yeah.
now I know we're kind of skipping down to the end of that list, which is distraction. But I think one of the ways maybe to gauge quality of refreshment or even amusement would be, is it directly or indirectly God honoring? The refreshment being spent in fellowship is not only good for the body and soul, but also is honoring unto God. Whereas when you start getting into amusement, now maybe question it a bit more. And then when you're in distraction level, you know, that now you're in the Isaiah violation. You're not pondering the works of God's hands.
So refreshment is something where the body and or the mind is on some level engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Amusement, that is turning off
Yep.
or dramatically decreasing, and
Yep.
diversion is avoidance.
R- right. Because you are actively engaged, but willfully on the wrong thing.
All right, so let is there a play? All right, I'm gonna try to defend diversion for a
I
second.
sure. Awesome.
So
I have
just
no
have fun.
dogs in any fight.
Yeah. I
Like,
like this. No, this is interesting. So is the because I was trying to think because I mean I like the idea generally you go from the better to the inferior there, but is there a time for diversion? I'll give an example. I remember there was newly married and had a we were having a major problem at a church I was serving, and it was just very stressful because I mean my new bride. It's like is my husband going to lose his job or something of that nature?
mhm.
And you said, you know what? Let's go and just get away from this for a minute. We're gonna go watch a dumb movie. We went and watched that Star Trek spoof, Galaxy Quest, I think it was, at the movie
What
theater.
a great movie.
And it is a wonderfully stupid movie. And it's funny, decades later, it's been like 25, 30 years since, this time. I still remember that time with my wife. It was
Right.
we needed a diversion. We needed to amuse ourselves. We were not running away from the problem. We were dealing with the problem, but it was becoming, very stressful, and you get worried about the future. So it's like, let's go out and let's have a diversion.
Sure.
So what do you think of that?
So
Is that a diversion? Is that an appropriate diversion?
no. So here's the thing. So when
Yeah.
distill that down,
Yeah, yeah.
in our as a pastor, the pastoral advice to give in our times of fear and uncertainty of the future, where should we run to for hope and security? It should be to
Of course.
Christ. Right.
Sure.
But this is the thing. But this is the thing. Is diversion from misery and pain, should that now because I'm with you on the need. There is a problem and it's unfixable, which is why it's that much more painful, because you can't do anything about it. The impending doom you can't fix. And all of those sinful fears, human issues come up. The response of just wanting nothing to do with any of it for a short period of time. And again, I'm not coming down on you on this, but
no,
right.
I go for it.
Being a matter of, because so there's no fault on, oh well, you should have been fixing the problem instead of wasting. It's like no. There was nothing for you to do, right? Should that time have been better spent pondering, I would say the appropriate response would have been prayer and fasting, not watching a really fun movie.
But why is it either or? There was much prayer
and fasting
over the situation.
Right.
I can't remember if there was fasting or not, to be honest. I've various times in life I've done.
I don't know that I've ever biblically fasted, which is a totally different episode to have a conversation on.
Yeah.
On prayer and fasting. I'm taking the we'll say the hardline biblical.
You're going very Puritan on me.
Puritan approach, right? The Puritan approach. And it's not. I'm not dismissing human misery. Christ is our sympathetic high priest. So I understand the suffering.
Why was that wrong? I mean, why was that not an appropriate recreation?
Right. So,
and by the way, I'm all for the Puritans, by the way.
No. And I actually have in the back of my mind a counter.
The response is because you're right. Because if you're avoiding the problem, you're not doing something you should be doing. That's a sin.
That's a problem. Yep.
Has there been prayer? Has there been, reflection? Has there been seeking godly counsel? All those things happened. Mm-hmm. Why is it, as we're dealing with this thing that's going over weeks and weeks and weeks? And you know what, dear, let's just go see a movie.
Right.
And we'll just go see some fun movie.
Right.
How's that wrong?
Oh, I don't know yet. So I'm coming from the opposite end. I'm trying to argue my way through.
Yeah.
I guess it
was a diversion. I mean, it was amusement. Yes. And it was refreshing. And the next day we dealt with the problem, moved forward, but there was it's funny though. I mean, maybe it's a sign of the weakness of the flesh. Like I said, I remember that day very fondly. So, and how many times do you remember seeing a movie decades later and the events around it?
Right. All right. So,
it was more, of course, time with my wife and refreshment.
No.
The movie was definitely a vehicle of that. I mean,
right.
So,
hold on.
Because with prayer, the focus, I do not mean to at all go after prayer, but just thinking these things out. The prayer would have been focused on it, and then granted, in good prayer, you start moving away from that and focusing more on God and resting in His providence. But again, there was much prayer involved in this situation. Yeah. But I don't think that was wrong. I think that was actually healthy.
So I'm going to take the Puritan approach. So I'm gonna step through again, thematically applicable, though not specifically, and we can
Yeah,
see
yeah.
if I'm off in some weird place. Psalm 73. So thematically, we're going to
Ooh, we're,
approach.
we're, we're in the 70s.
So
What
Psalm
verse?
73, a psalm of Asaph. I don't know. I don't know how Hebrew names work. So, um, the the lament, of course, is at the beginning. Um, Starting in verse 3. But I was envious of the boastful. I saw the prosperity of the wicked, for there are no pains in their death. Their bodies are fat. They have not, they are not in trouble as other people, nor are they plagued like others. Therefore, pride is their necklace. Violence covers them as garment. Their eyes bulge with fatness. They have more than a heart could wish. So on and so forth. They're super awful and evil. They're mocking God in verse 11. Verse 12, they're wicked, and they seem to be almost rewarded for it. The psalmist in 13 and 14 then goes on, surely I have kept my heart pure for nothing and washed my hands in innocence. For all day long I am plagued and chastened every morning. So the psalmist is suffering while the wicked are not. And so the setting is
Uh-huh.
there is an affliction, super afflicted, super confused, perplexed because of the injustice, right? His solution, if you will, and then we see in verse 16, when I thought to understand this, it was troublesome in my eyes until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their end. So then he goes through and having gone into the Lord's sanctuary where revelation was given and peace and comfort was provided in his confusion, perplexity, struggle, and turmoil, he then had that revelation, that teaching that no, they actually are ultimately judged, so on and so forth. That is the conclusion in that. And then the last two verses, I think, kind of tying it all in there. For those who are far from you will perish. You destroy everyone who is unfaithful to you. And verse 28, but it is good for me to draw near to God. I have taken my refuge in the Lord that I may declare all your works. So in his time of suffering, very personal, his own misery, looking around, seeing that the evil people are not miserable, he goes to the sanctuary of the Lord for comfort, and that is where he receives that comfort and with the, if you will, the mindfulness, the pondering of the works of God's hands. So in his suffering, it was going to church, to take the very literal going into the temple of the Lord. I know that's not exactly what it is. The pondering of the works of God. Uh, we are to go to him for comfort uh,
Sure.
in our suffering. So the point being, the expectation of distraction from our suffering should be placed upon God to fulfill, not based upon a movie to fulfill, is as close to a criticism as I can get. Now there are
Because
numerous
I mean,
issues
obviously,
with this, but I want to
yeah,
try to push to that.
because no, 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 no.
There are problems here, which I'll get to.
Yeah, yeah. Because let me ask if everything was going well
There are
and we
huge
went to see
problems.
Galaxy Quest,
Uh-huh.
no crime, no foul, right?
Oh, as a matter of, you just kind of like, boy, what a long day at work. Let's go
Yep.
relax somewhere. No, because it wouldn't have been distraction. It would have been maybe amusement. It would have been in the
Yes.
yellow rather than the red. So
Right.
again, it's
Right.
not the
Right.
object, it's the intent.
Yeah. Yep. Well, but if it is, and I guess and I intentionally went with this example because I would
Yep.
agree with you. I would agree with the concept that if you're doing it as a distraction to avoid a problem,
Right.
that's
That's sin.
wrong.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yep.
But in the situation I gave, it's
To
not an
avoid
avoidance
pain.
of a problem.
Right. No, you're avoiding pain.
True, true, but the problem, but it's not avoiding the problem.
No.
You're avoiding
Well,
pain, and so
it's
therefore, oh no, because
it's
there's a difference
yep.
between avoiding problem and avoiding the pain. I mean,
Right.
the problem is, okay, is there something that needs to be repented about? Is there something that needs to be fixed? Is there something that needs to be done? And the answer is at that time, that's, that evening, the answer is no.
Right.
And and what you're theorizing, and I understand
Right.
we're just kind of pushing on the edges, which I enjoy doing, is you should never use entertainment ever for a distraction.
Oh,
I I
sure. I
don't,
mean, for the
yeah,
sake of argument, yeah. Let's word
yeah.
it that way. Um,
And I would argue, and I like I said, I just don't see that in scripture.
no, that's dumb.
If there was
Right.
not like, you didn't bring this before the Lord, you didn't bring it for prayer, you didn't seek godly counsel, you
Right.
didn't try to deal with those, there's difficulties. Sure, all those are sins, and those
Right.
must be dealt
Yeah.
with.
Yep.
But as you're going through this, just to have a time of refreshment with one's wife and just
Sure.
go watch a kind of a fun, silly, stupid movie,
Yep.
no crime, no foul. And it actually, I'm going to push back the other way. That actually might be helpful. I know like when I deal with folks who are in major depression and they're just living inside,
Right.
obviously you focus on law and gospel.
Right.
You show them the sin, you call them repentance, you tell them the gospel, you encourage them in the faith, you tell them you need to get out and do stuff. Now that other thing, that last one, it gets a little broad. I said, look, at very least, you need to start going to church. Maybe start going to Bible study. But even if you just go out for a walk, just do that. Get your attention away on something else. And even if it's like, I'm going to go out and watch a movie with a friend. Yep, that's better than sitting in your room and just sulking all day.
Right. Right.
And I guess
Yes.
that last advice is it somewhat of a distraction.
Right.
Hmm.
So to go back and to continue
Yeah, yeah,
being a Puritan, so
yeah, yeah,
because there are two issues being
yeah, yeah.
discussed. There is the reason for the suffering, which you can't address because it's future. But then there's the other question of, is your suffering a matter of sinful fear? And now are you, rather than going to God with that fear, you are distracted? So, because you're like, what if I lose my job tomorrow? You can't address that problem. But that's not
Yeah.
actually what's causing you trouble. Your faithlessness, the weakness of your faith, no, sorry, not the weakness, your little faith, your
Mhm, mhm.
fear is what's causing you the problem today. Tomorrow,
Okay,
losing your
okay,
job
wrong,
could
wrong with
cause
that.
you a problem. Today is your fear of tomorrow. If you go to a movie instead of bringing that sinful fear to God, now you may have prayed for tomorrow and said, there, I'm done, I can go watch a movie. But if you're
Yeah, yeah.
terrified because you're actually looking to the creature for help instead of the creator, the today fear is the problem
Uh,
to address. And if you go to a movie, instead of bringing today's fear to God, now you are in the distraction sin category.
all right, how about this?
But,
So
but hold on,
you're afraid to no,
before
no,
we
this is
move on
interesting. You're
really
afraid
too far with this, real quick, um,
what?
back to your, like, hey, just get out of your house and go do something to try to improve upon things. And I want to bring this in because in Ecclesiastes, I think somewhere, um, wine it is unwise for rulers to drink. And the contrast is, of course, stated that allow this for the poor to alleviate some of their misery. And then also, I think in one of the pastorals, there is that matter of a little
Go
bit of
then, eat your
wine.
bread in happiness and drink your wine with a cheerful heart,
Right.
for God has already approved of your works.
So there's nothing wrong with, because again, just to even specifically go with alcohol, drunkenness is bad. A proper or appropriate amount of alcohol, which does not lead to drunkenness, will still have a chemical impact on you. That's how alcohol works. That's not bad. And in fact,
Yeah, yeah.
that alleviates suffering. Now, to be fair, that is a type of physic at that point, right? That is a type of medication. So I'm not against medication, if you will. And if watching a movie is a form of medicine, as long as it is used appropriately and not abused the way alcohol and pharmaceuticals can be, I have no real problem with it. So like I want to give my honest answer to this topic before we continue on the can I make an argument as to it's bad that you're watching movies. But so like physic, medicine is good. In fact, God has given us these plants for our use. No, that doesn't excuse marijuana. You're all stupid. But and you're getting stupider the more you use it. So because there is an appropriate amount and use for it, for these helps. Also, if you take the very super crazy strict approach, Puritan, I should need no one other than God ever in all things, you miss completely the fact that God has given us ordinary means of his supernatural comfort.
Yep.
Even before the fall, it was not good that man should be alone. Man was given woman because man shouldn't be alone. Now, it wasn't that man was sinful and he should have relied upon God for every single need, emotional and physical, directly in some manna from heaven scenario, but that he relies upon God for the gift of a good wife, which Proverbs says houses are an inheritance, but a good wife is a gift from God. So going to your wife for comfort is not only a good and godly thing as you who are in need, but it's also a sanctifying thing for your wife because she is your helper. So,
and she's actually more stressed than you are because women are focused more about, I mean, not in a bad way, but like the notion of losing in a lot of ways, you're having your husband lose his job is stressful for the man, no doubt. It's also almost equally, if not worse, for the woman.
Right. Oh, I understand. Right. So, all that aside, you know, but the fear thing, though, I still do want to address.
Yeah.
But yes,
because sorry. Because you were going where I was going to go. I mean, I agree that it's a sin not trusting in the Lord in the future. And so you confess that sin, you admit, like, yeah, I'm scared I might lose my job. I'm going to turn that over to you, Lord. Yeah, you pray with your wife about that. And you look at her, it's like, honey, you know what? Let's go see a movie. I'll take you out tonight. Let's just go and have some fun.
Awesome.
I don't think that's a sin. I think that's I think there's actually some good wisdom to there. Because I actually wrote because I was gonna say I was gonna write down, to enjoy creation is a commandment by God in the appropriate moderation. But you when you gave your full answer, I appreciate
no, I
that.
know.
But again, I like taking the extremes. I'm like, okay, can I defend here? Can I defend, diversion? And but I do like the general notion that, refreshment green, amusement yellow, diversion red.
Right.
And I gave a super specific reason, but most time we do diversion, it's actually you're truly trying to avoid doing something good.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
so I was trying to go and and there's always a danger, and I just see it so many times in the church, and I'm going to do it with my own crazy thinking, is you go to the worst case scenario to justify it. You're always seeking to find some excuse, some justification for what you kind of probably deep down know is wrong.
Right.
So.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I definitely agree on all of that. And again, it's one of those I don't know, are then painkillers diversion, sort of a thing.
Again,
diversion as avoidance is sin. Diversion as, temporary reprieve, that balm in Gilead, something that soothes a wound. I see no problem with that. at all.
I love the reference. I always laugh when I hear. I love the name Gilead. It's a great name. As a kid, I'm like, why is there a bomb?
There's
That always so confused me. Anyways,
that balm in
but
Gilead.
on the
Is there balm in
there's a
Gilead?
bomb in Gilead. They're gonna
To
blow up. Yeah. Anyways,
to quote Edgar Allan Poe from The Raven.
yeah, yeah. So, but the physics reference in the Westminster Confession, the reference is interesting. It's Isaiah 38. It says 21, but I'm going to go with 18. Isaiah 38:18. For Sheol cannot thank you, death cannot praise you. Those who go down to the pit cannot hope for your faithfulness, refer to the Almighty.
Mhm.
It is the living who give thanks to you, as I do today, as a father tells his sons about your faithfulness. The Lord will surely save me. So we will play my songs on string instruments all the days of our life at the house of the Lord. Now, Isaiah, this is the verse they quote. Now, Isaiah had said, let them take a cake of figs and apply it to the boil, that he may recover. Then Hezekiah said, what is the sign that I shall go up to the house of the Lord? Which is an interesting use of physics. But again, to your point, that focus on the Lord, but also that enjoyment of the creation.
Right.
And also the appropriate use of medicine. I mean, there is a place for medicine.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's and there's a place for painkillers appropriately assigned by a doctor, done in the correct way, sure, but man, start being afraid. I mean, I'm no doctor, so I'm not gonna give
Right.
any major
No,
advice
and
on
that
that.
gets
But
into a whole,
yeah,
that whole different um
yeah,
that whole different realm. Right, because it's a
yeah,
matter of abuse. The
yeah.
inappropriate use of something that should be temporary or for good
Because
things.
we can use refreshment
Hmm.
as diversion. And
Oh, of
I'm very,
course.
very skilled at this. Like, there's something I'm supposed to be doing for the church.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, like I have to, like, I don't know, I'll pick up something. I have to go and confront someone who's engaging in sin. I know it's going to get ugly, and I'm like, oh no, you know what? I'll work on the sermon instead. Yes, because I'm
Right.
working for the Lord. So I mean, that's not
Yep.
even recreation.
Yep. I'll
That's
just
godly work, but it's obviously diversion.
Yep.
So yeah, so
Yeah. I'll do something I'd rather do to avoid the things I don't want to do.
yep.
Right. And that is an awful place to be and to stay in. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yep. No, I don't want to do it. I'm going to do something else. Right.
And you're
And
justifying because you're
oh,
actually doing something useful, but
yep.
of course you're lying to yourself
Right. Right. Of
and to the
course. No,
Almighty.
and that is an absolute avoidance of what we should be
Yeah.
doing, and that is definitely
Yep.
sin. Um, right. I find it interesting that I think our initial point of discussion almost started to get to the point of talking about should church be entertaining. Um, and then we
Yeah.
and then we made it more what is the appropriate context and use of entertainment.
Well, we haven't talked about that before because
Right.
we've talked about modern use of amusements, like,
Mhm.
fantasy role playing games and stuff like that,
Right.
and that is a problem that interests me. We have talked about the corruption of worship before, but
Right.
I've never actually had a conversation. What
Right.
is recreation? And I knew the Westminster, because we used it recently for church, larger catechism, put recreation under a sin. And I was blown away. I was put under the sin of murder, which is just amazing. But I didn't know it today. I didn't notice it. It's part of the commandment
Right.
that there is a command to have recreation.
Right. Because
And
it's
I've never
the
defined
yeah.
it before. And I never thought of the definition. And again, I kind of like the general levels of it. So I think this was a very helpful
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, I did stay away from worship,
It's
not because
it's
worship's unimportant, but
right.
because
No,
we've done that. And
that's
this has
fine.
been new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that I think that's fine. No, and you're right, because we've talked about the um that problem of demanding or expecting worship to be entertaining. And I mean to kind of conclude with that, and I think it goes in with this. So recreation as a form of refreshment is the appropriate use of good things. It's also limited, it's infrequent, And it's sort of, to use the term, I guess we'll say holistic. It's a part of something greater. Um, which is very, which is that difference in eating, I don't know, in eating an orange, which has sugar, versus just eating sugar. There is a difference.
Straight up white gold.
Just
Straight up white
straight, right,
powder.
right. So, and this is that thing. So it's not to say that church can't be entertaining. The problem is, of course, when we care care not for any of it because it's not entertaining. That's as bad as saying, I don't want to eat spinach because it doesn't taste like cake. It's like, well, that's a huge problem because good
Yeah.
food isn't going to taste like cake. If you
Right.
expect all food to taste like cake, you have an avoidance problem, the distraction problem. You want everything to be a distraction from the monotony of good food. And I think that's
Sorry.
more how our pleasure seeking,
Yeah.
behavior manifests when it comes to entertainment with church, because we'd rather watch a movie or a football game than
Yeah.
go to church, because one is distilled down and manufactured to be entertaining, and church may or may not be. And so we'd rather go with the cheap refined sugar than actually consume something that requires work and effort and energy to ponder, to comprehend. But of course, if you eat a whole cake, you're going to get sick and die. Whereas eating healthily is conducive to
Well,
health, to
I said
run
that
with the
one
food and
Sunday. This, yeah, I said it one Super Bowl Sunday. I said, "Question: What's more amusing, watching the Super Bowl, or listening to one of my sermons?" And I
right.
got a few nervous laughs, and I'm like, "The answer is the Super Bowl."
Right.
But are we children? You know?
Right.
I mean, if we think the whole purpose is just amusement, you're being a stupid child.
Yep.
There's a time to act like adults.
Yep.
Um, so this has been very profitable, and we've hit the
Sure.
hour mark.
Yep.
It would be interesting to talk about. I do want to talk one of these days about discipline because I was thinking you can even use the most godly thing as a distraction.
Oh, of course.
Like, yeah, it's like like I don't want to go to work today. Oh, I'll call up my boss. I'm like, I have to be in prayer this day, so I'm not gonna go to work.
Right.
You know,
Right. Hey,
no.
it's like that. It's like what I said a long time ago. Um, you can't divorce your wife because you believe you've been called to be a traveling
Yeah.
preacher on marital
Yeah.
advice, right?
Oh,
Like,
I've seen so. Oh, I know.
you
Oh,
know, like,
I've seen some people want to become missionaries that do that. It's
right.
like, no, you have your first duty.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Oh no,
but
you
that's for
can
the
you
but
can definitely do evil. You can do
yeah,
good things in evil ways, which
yeah,
makes them evil things.
yeah.
So yeah, it is your
So
sin.
this is helpful. I
Yeah,
like the
it's good.
definition of recreation from again. Thank you for 1828, Mr. Webster.
Right.
Praise the Lord for His mercy. We do need. I would like to talk about that discipline thing one of these
I
days.
like discipline.
Um,
Discipline equals freedom.
yeah, yeah.
I
Good seal
which is
saying. But
I
anyway,
I want to I want to get that book. It's not bad. It's Jocko what
Jocko Wilkin, what Wilco,
Wilkin.
whatever his name,
I don't
Jocko. Yeah,
know. It just
yeah,
blows my mind that he's from Torrington, Connecticut.
yep,
I mean, like, that's
yep,
the coolest thing ever. So,
yep. But
and he was in the
well,
Navy.
any
We
last
have
thoughts on
so
our main
much in
subject? I
common.
distracted us. What?
I said, and he was in the Navy. We have so much in common.
Right, even similar.
And
Anyways,
that's where the similarities end. We're both from
yes.
Torrington, Connecticut, and we were both in the Navy. The end.
Yeah, but I'm the last who should cast stones in that area. But anyways,
Right.
any last thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, constructive thoughts? No, I'm good.
So I have constructive thoughts.
Go ahead.
So do what you're called to do in the Lord. There is a place for refreshment, especially when it's strength and your spirit
Mhm.
is being strengthened. Be a little more careful about amusement and watch out for diversion. So
Mhm.
I'd like to thank my friend Greg and thank you for joining us and hope to see you next time.
Great.
Christ's blessings to you all. Amen.